Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Greetings of peace to all of you. We begin with the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulika al-Kareem wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Wa amma ba'd. Praise and glory be to God, Lord of all creation. We praise and glorify His holy name. We beseech His forgiveness for our shortcomings. We ask His blessings in the important work which we do on behalf of one another, on behalf of our future generations, and on behalf of the Mother who cuddles us and cares for us all, Mother Earth. Dear brothers and sisters, it's wonderful to be with you today, coming to you from my cold New Jersey neighborhood, and thankful to God that we have the blessings of warmth and each other's company this evening. There's a saying of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that at the beginning of the month of Rajab, which is the 7th month of the Islamic lunar calendar, which we find ourselves in, he would make the following supplication: Allahumma barik lana fi Rajab wa Sha'ban wa baligna Ramadan. O Allah, give us the blessings of this month of Rajab and the month to follow of the Islamic lunar calendar, Sha'ban, and allow us to live to witness the blessings associated with the month of Ramadan. And we say, Ameen. Every Friday, Muslims are reminded in most places of prayer, and of course, a lot of these days we've been listening to our sermons online because of the COVID restrictions. We pray God that they get lifted soon. In the second khutbah, in the second part of the sermon, we are reminded with the verse, Inna Allah ya'muru bil adli wal ihsan wa ita'i dhil qurba wa yanha 'anil fahsha'i wal munkari wal baghi ya'idhukum la'allakum tadhakkarun. This verse is from Surah An-Nahl, the chapter of the bee, chapter 16, verse 90. Indeed, Allah, God, commands justice and equity, as well as courtesy to close relatives. He forbids indecency, wickedness, and aggression. He instructs you, so perhaps you will be mindful. My dear respected brothers and sisters, this part of the sermon was instituted by what is referred to in Islamic history, or the person referred to in Islamic history often as the fifth rightly guided Khalifa, the rightly guided representative or follower of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, in terms of leadership. His name was Omar bin Abdul Aziz. And it was during the time of Omar bin Abdul Aziz that the worldwide community of faith at that time, of the Muslim community, experienced unprecedented growth and development. This included the development of infrastructure, the ensuring that public access to waterways, to thoroughways, and also that economic equity be in place. Zakatul Mal, which is our collection of mandatory charity, and it is to be given as a right that the poor have upon the well-to-do in society, found no person for it to be distributed to, for everybody was well enough that they did not need charitable giving. Although his rule was short, for 30 months, I think it teaches us or has important lessons for us. And that is, we can accomplish a lot if we are inspired and committed and willing to work together to make the lifestyle changes and altering our consumption practices, and by reorienting ourselves towards living a life in harmony and balance with the just cosmic order. The Quran refers to this as al-mizan. And to repair our relationship with Mother Earth and with one another, for these two are connected together. And we can only do this from the Islamic tradition. We seek to do this within the Islamic tradition in following the footsteps of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, our beloved Prophet, who the Quran refers to, and he's referred to as Uswatun Hasana, which means the best or most beautiful life example. He has been described, Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, the Prophet Muhammad, by some observers, and I would call them astute observers who definitely got it right, as the green prophet. And he is the one whom God has described in the Holy Quran as Rahmatan lil Alameen, mercy to all the worlds, all creatures great and small, all our fellow earthlings who cohabitat with us on this blessed and sacred planet. Dear brothers and sisters, for only through working together, for being together, for striving together, can we succeed as we seek to address the immediacy of the climate emergency. 911, Mother Earth is calling. We need to respond. There is an existential threat, not just to human life, but to all life on this planet, to ourselves, al-insan, as well as our fellow worshipers. And I know that we often refer to the fellow creatures on this earth as creatures, but in the Islamic teachings, they are also al-ibad. They are worshipers of God, each one, as the Quran informs us, being socially organized communities. Alima salata wa tasbiha, knowing their mechanisms and methods and modes of prayer and glorification of the Lord, distinct to them. So our fellow earthlings, great and small, who cohabitate with us on this blessed earth. Dear brothers and sisters, we all are present in God's house. For the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, reminded us, Al-ard kulluha masjida. The earth, the entirety of her, is a place of prayer, a place of worship, a sacred place. And all then who inhabit that earth are considered to be members of our extended congregation of worshipers. However, that existential threat, as a result of anthropogenic, human-caused harm, in the language of the Quran, bi'aydin nas, as a result of what the hands of man have wrought, has resulted in global warming and global climate change, driven by greenhouse gas emissions and pollutants from primarily fossil fuel burning that is exacerbated as well by forest deforestation. Justice and equity, adl wal qist, in the verses that I recited at the beginning from Surah An-Nahl, the chapter of the bee, are central to Islam's teachings and practices. Hence the reminder at our most sacred day of the week, at the most sacred time of the day. Adl wal qist and ihsan. It is a comprehensive and inclusive justice and equity that honors, protects, and cherishes our common Mother Earth, common mother for all created beings. For as our Prophet Muhammad ﷺ told us over 1400 years ago and directed us, تَحْفِظُوا الْأَرْضِ فَإِنَّهَا أُمُّكُمْ. Protect, preserve, care for, and honor the earth, for she is your mother, and will testify for or against you. She is testifying, dear sisters and brothers, now. She is bearing witness to what is being done to her. She's crying out because we have disrupted the natural world. We have violated her and the rhythms through which she used to function as a result or because of our unprecedented actions. These in turn have had, every action has an equal and opposite reaction, a reaction from Mother Earth in the form of extreme weather events which we are experiencing daily. We pray for the lives and the well-being of our sisters and brothers in humanity throughout the world, and even here in the States right now, for example, in Texas, who are experiencing massive life disruptions as a result of extreme weather events. Dislocations then follow. Refugees and climate refugees will follow in their wake and are following in their wake. And we are seeing and witnessing the unprecedented global pandemic of COVID-19. The scientists tell us it's a zoonotic disease. It results from the unmitigated human interaction with other creatures of the wild who are forced because of habit and destruction to either become extinct or lost. Extinct, and this results in the loss of biodiversity, or to mingle with us, become part of our neighborhoods and our places of residence. The natural barriers that were there before have been removed, and the hands that have been removed are human hands. This webinar, dear brothers and sisters, and I'll try to change my slide. No, not changing. There we go. This webinar is a joint endeavor and collaboration of Isna, Imana, and Imana, Islamic Society of North America's Green Initiatives Program, the Islamic Medical Association of North America, and the Muslim Alliance in North America. It is part of a series of webinars that Isna is hosting and co-sponsoring with various national Muslim organizations and humanitarian organizations that are focused on health and well-being through our conscientious and sustainable living in keeping with the Quranic paradigm and prophetic life example. Allow me to take a moment, and I'll just take a moment to try to share with you a couple of background information or little information on ISNA's green initiatives. The Islamic Society of North America is characterized and is known as being the largest and oldest umbrella Muslim organization in America. Through its Green Initiative team and its mission, it has decided to and has articulated that Islam has ordained us to be stewards and vicegerents, khulafa al-ard, protectors of this planet. And as protectors and guardians of the planet, we assume the trust or the Imana which has been given to us by the Creator to care for creation, to care for the planet, and to care for one another, a loving care. Muslims need now more than ever to be an eco-friendly community. I'm honored to be on this team with my co-team members, Sister Huda Al-Kaf, Sister Nana Furman, Sister Uzma Mirza, and Dr. Shah Masroor, who's our chairperson, in leading this effort on behalf of ISNA. There are various strategies and goals that we put forth and work on as the Green Initiative Committee of ISNA, and more information can be found at isna.net. Let me go back for 1 second. Okay. This webinar also, dear brothers and sisters, is part and parcel of ISNA's special programming during Black History Month, when we remember the historic struggles of our African American sisters and brothers for justice and equity, for civil and human rights in the face of the satanic forces of racism, white supremacy. Black History Month is a month when we seek to honor the legacy and recall the contributions of our Black and brown sisters and brothers to our collective history and our collective advancement here in America. And we do so in the face of those who desire its erasure and forgetting. Remembrance is an act of courage, is an act of resistance. Let us make no mistake, social justice, environmental justice, racial justice, and economic justice are inextricably entwined. Climate change, pollution, and environmental degradation and destruction have exacerbated the systemic and systematic racial, regional, social, environmental, and economic injustices by disproportionately affecting indigenous peoples, communities of color, Black and Latino communities, as well as other communities of vulnerability. The Quran refers to these, what our Christian brothers and sisters will often quote Jesus is saying, the least of these, refers to these in general by the term mustad'afin, which means those who are made weak as a result of the circumstances they find themselves in, but not some inherent nature within themselves. And therefore they are subsequently made mazlum. They are the ones who are oppressed by the oppressors and the tyrants, by the abusive powers that be. It is an inescapable fact that here in the US of A, the most polluted environments are where mostly people of color and the poor live and work. Communities of color, which are often poor and disenfranchised, and therefore historically and routinely targeted to host, both by corporations, by government chartered utilities, and by government policies themselves, as well as the legacy of communal discriminatory practices like redlining. They're forced to host facilities that have negative environmental and health impacts, landfills, dirty industrial plants, truck depots, and the like. These pollute, degrade, and negatively impact air, water, and soil, Earth's key elements necessary for a healthy and sustainable life and for ensuring the success of our children and our children's children. Our distinguished speakers this evening will, inshallah, God willing, share important information on why the hood, colloquial for neighborhood, ecosystems of America's inner cities are experiencing such suffering and are the geographic locations of environmental injustice and environmental racism, and how and what specific steps and grassroots initiatives are being taken to mitigate the harms and restore the balance, and in short, green the hood. I would like to take this moment to introduce our dear sister, who will be presenting on behalf of the Islamic Medical Association of North America, Lubna Ahmed, who has graciously agreed to be with us this evening. Our sister Lubna Ahmed is passionate about working at the community level to build capacity and advance the sustainable well-being of under-resourced populations. Lubna was born and raised in Ohio and holds a BA in psychology from Miami University. After living in Washington, D.C. for a number of years, where she earned a master's in public health from George Washington University, Lubna served as an environmental educator with the Peace Corps in Nicaragua. She then went on to work at We Act, W-E Act, for environmental justice in New York City before coming to the Groundwork Denver. Sister Lubna, you're most welcome. We welcome you, and the floor is yours. I will stop sharing and invite you to take the forum.
Okay, assalamu alaikum, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here this evening. My name is Lubna Ahmed. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I wanted to start off my presentation with a quick land acknowledgement. For those of you who don't know what a land acknowledgement is, it's essentially taking a moment to pay respect to the indigenous caretakers of the lands in which we now reside. And so with that said, I'd like to recognize and honor and respect the Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Ute nations as the traditional stewards of the air, water, and land on which I now reside, in which Denver, Colorado is. I wanted to start off by just quickly reviewing who the Islamic Medical Association of North America is. I am a member of the association and have had the privilege to volunteer with them in the past. The vision of Imana is to positively impact the health of humanity, evidenced by its integrated programs on global medical relief. And the overall mission is to foster health promotion, disease prevention, and health maintenance in communities around the world through direct patient care, health programs, and advocacy. In terms of Imana's work, and I also highly encourage you to visit our website, imana.org/climate-crisis. Just wanted to mention kind of some of the work that we do. We are an affiliate with the Medical Society Consortium on Climate and Health, focusing on advocacy for all US communities, especially those most vulnerable. We are a partner with Clinicians for Climate Action. There are chapters at the local, state, and federal level, and we're really focusing on education and advocacy, especially regarding bills, legislation that impacts clean water and coal plants. We are partners with various free clinics in underserved areas around the country, providing health education on basic health topics. And with IMR, Imana Medical Relief, we respond to health issues in the wake of disasters, usually as a result of climate change. and focus on adaptation, particularly providing care to those most vulnerable. Imana is really centering the issue of the climate crisis. You know, I highly encourage all of you to get involved, and I hope that some of what we talk about here today will be inspiration to do so. I wanted to start off by providing some definitions, do a little bit of grounding. You know, for those of you who are climate warriors, climate activists, this may be very basic information for all of you, but you know, I did cater this presentation to a lay audience, and starting at the most basic. So what is environmental health? And so when we're thinking about environmental health, we're thinking about our environment, so everything that is around us. So in my case, everything that is in this room. And, you know, when we're in the outside world, your surrounding air quality, the amount of noise that you hear, everything in your environment. Our genetic code, so what we are born with, the genes that we are born with, you know, what we are predisposed with, and then our choices, our personal choices. This can be, you know, did you eat a cheeseburger for lunch or a salad for lunch? No judgment either way, just making a point that there are personal choices that we make. And sometimes we have a lot of influence on what those choices are, and sometimes we frankly don't. But at the center of all of that is our health, our environmental health. I also want to ground us in the concept of environmental justice. Environmental justice, and this is a definition provided by the Environmental Protection Agency of the United States. Environmental justice is a fair treatment and a meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. What does that mean? Environmental justice is essentially the ability of all people to live, work, play, worship, and learn in a safe and healthy environment. Emphasizing that all people, regardless of what we look like, what we believe, how much money we have, that we can really be meaningfully involved in sharing things, in shaping things like environmental laws, environmental policies. And oftentimes we really like to center what we call BILPOC voices, Black, Indigenous, Latinx people of color. You may hear me reference that in this presentation, or you may hear it in the news media. BILPOC or BIPOC is really centering specific people of color who are disproportionately impacted by environmental hazards. Environmental racism. Environmental racism is racial discrimination that plays out through policies and practices, and emphasizes the disproportionate impact that environmental hazards have on people of color. We're talking about frontline communities, people who live in and around industrial sites that have, you know, high carbon emissions, toxic pollutants. Some really tangible, more recent examples of when we've seen environmental racism play out, for example, is the Flint, Michigan water crisis back in 2014, at least it began in 2014. In 2016, the Standing Rock water crisis that sparked protests on Indigenous reservations. And the list goes on, but those are just a couple of examples. The social determinants of health is a public health term that emphasizes conditions in environments in which people are born, live, learn, work, play, and worship, and age. And these are factors that really determine our health. Take, for example, somebody who doesn't have access to healthcare, is living in an environment that isn't safe or isn't healthy, that doesn't have a lot of social support, that is considered low income, maybe doesn't have access to fresh foods. Kind of thinking about all of those different factors and how that impacts our health and determines our health. That is something that's kind of at the center of understanding environmental justice. Okay, so for the course of, for this presentation, as Imam Zaid mentioned, there are kind of three things that we're really going to be focusing on: how climate change and environmental sustainability are related to the earth, our air, our water. Some of you may say there's a fourth element that's missing here, which is fire. There's always four elements, but wildfires are heavily impacted by all these other three things. They're very much interconnected, and those will come into play throughout the presentation. I wanted to start off by speaking specifically about our earth, our land, our soil, our physical space. And these are just some examples of things that we focus on when we're talking about climate change. So brownfields, which are urban sites for potential building development that have previously been used for something else. Some examples are abandoned gas stations, dry cleaners, industrial properties, commercial properties where chemicals have been used or transported, and then something gets built on top of that. Those are considered brownfields. And you can imagine the number of environmental justice issues that might come up when you're building on top of a brownfield, a toxic area that was once used for something and now people are living there, breathing that air, maybe consuming vegetables that are being grown in that soil. Another topic I wanted to touch on is gentrification. This kind of may seem like a off-topic thing when you're talking about climate change, but it is very much related. As many of you know, gentrification is the process of renewal and rebuilding, accompanied by this influx of middle class or affluent people into a place that's considered deteriorating, often places that have poorer residents. And we often see a lot of displacement when it comes to gentrification. And things that kind of are paired with gentrification are the use of land, which kind of takes me into the next thing, inequitable land use, which is other major problem. When we are talking about urban planning and zoning policies, are we in our communities, are we focusing on these policies through supporting community health and wellness and equitable development? Or as we often see, are many of the parks in green spaces in our communities concentrated in affluent neighborhoods and not in neighborhoods of color or where low-income folks reside? Housing inequality is a major one. Folks that are in low-income housing or public housing are disproportionately low-income folks, people of color. And lastly, the heat island effect. And I'll explain that just a bit more. Here is a map of New York City, and I will have a lot of kind of New York City-centric examples because that's where I just moved from. So here's a map of New York City, all 5 boroughs, the Bronx, Manhattan, Queens, Brooklyn, Staten Island. And you can see this is a heat vulnerability map, meaning the areas that are more red are more vulnerable to heat. And if you were to overlay this with a demographic map, you would see that the neighborhoods where predominantly people of color reside are the same neighborhoods where the vulnerability to heat is the highest. We're talking about neighborhoods like Harlem, Bedford, Brownsville, Flatbush, Jamaica, Queens. And just to kind of put it into perspective, from 2000 to 2010, nearly 50% of those affected by heat-related deaths in New York City were African American. The statistics often speak for themselves, and I just mentioned that one to kind of paint the picture. So why is that? Why are people vulnerable to heat? Less access to green spaces. We know that vegetative spaces, places with trees, really reduce the amount of heat in the environment. So if it's a sunny day, you're going to feel much cooler underneath a tree or on a grassy lawn than on concrete. Less access to air conditioning, more diesel buses, the list goes on. But that was a lot of grim stuff. So as I'm presenting these problems and framing this, I also want to touch on some success stories and solutions. This is an example of a success story. This is a waterfront in West Harlem. On the left, you'll see a picture of a highly impermeable surface, often used for a parking lot. In 1998, We Act for Environmental Justice, the organization that I was previously working with in New York City, partnered with a community board to organize what they called the Harlem on the River Project. And the goal was to engage community leaders and residents in developing this community-driven plan that would increase access to the Harlem waterfront and raise interest in, frankly, one of the most neglected neighborhoods in northern Manhattan. The organization We Act worked with more than 200 residents, elected officials, representatives from New York City Department of Parks and Rec to develop this community vision plan for the waterfront. And they submitted it, construction started, and on the right, you'll see the outcome here, which is this beautiful park, which I've been to many times. There are a number of community events that take place here. And I point out this example because this kind of shows the power of organizing, of identifying a need in your community. The picture on the left, this would have been replaced with, real estate with fancy apartment buildings or hotels that would not have been accessible to the people that actually live in that community. And instead, the community fought back and they wanted a park there where people could recreate and enjoy time with their families. And that's what happened. It's a very beautiful story. Moving on to the topic of air, there are a number of things, and just to provide a little bit of background, a lot of times we focus on air pollution, really thinking about our outdoor ambient air quality. Some of these things that are top of mind, for example, are wildfires, which this past year ran rampant, especially in the western part of the country. Traffic, so obviously when we drive around in our cars, we're using fossil fuels, they combust, they create a polluting environment for us to breathe in. Fuels to, for example, heat our homes or cool our homes, especially in older buildings, they still use what's called heating oil. And when that combusts and gets into the air, it contributes to pollution. And of course, industrial factories, we've all seen this picture of, factories letting out emissions and thinking about the impact that has on air quality as well. One thing I don't want to ignore is indoor air quality, which is not something that we often think about. But is very important to focus on as well. Things that could lead to poor indoor air quality or bad ventilation, like cooking without a fan on, scented candles, cleaning products, the presence of insects and rodents. And if you have pre-existing asthma conditions, and you're in an environment where your indoor air quality is bad, and then you go outside and your outdoor air quality is bad, you can imagine what kind of health outcomes, what kind of scenario that kind of creates. So again, focusing on a few solutions, focusing on renewable energy, solar, wind, hydroelectric, less burning of fossil fuels and combustion that leads to pollution and impacts our health. So really thinking about, at a global scale, investing in these technologies, but even if we have the privilege of being a homeowner, considering doing some sort of installations like this. In terms of the indoor air quality that I was talking about, ensuring that our homes are well ventilated, keeping our home clean, really thinking about the cleaning products that we're using and how that's going to linger in the air. I want to acknowledge that sometimes these things are totally out of our control. So for example, the New York City Housing Authority comes to mind as, one of the most negligent landlords. There are people in the winter months that don't have access to heating. So they'll turn their oven on and leave the door open as a heating source. And that undoubtedly reduces the quality of indoor air. But this is the reason why environmental justice is so important in terms of, identifying these issues and rallying in the community, not only to to create awareness, but to do something about it and it result in something actionable. Lastly, in terms of water, there are a number of examples, but things to focus on: quantity of water, so scarcity and shortage. There are a number of cities around the country that are in a drought, LA, Denver, Phoenix, just for example. And not only access to drinking water, but I'm talking about the impact that lack of water has on our rivers that are drying up and the destruction of ecosystems as a result. Agriculture, if we can't grow crops, what does that mean for us as a nation, also for our economy? Also water quality, toxins and contaminants that might be in our water, and accessibility. This is much more so of an issue in rural communities, but having access to water. In terms of solutions, there are a number of things that we can do, and I'll just mention a little bit about what I do at my current job at Groundwork Denver. We really focus on community science, working with youth, testing water, constantly monitoring, in this case for E. coli. You can see this picture of me. I'm very happy monitoring for E. coli on the river. Reporting this data to the state and federal entities, sharing the data with partners, drawing conclusions about what that means, and developing solutions to tackle issues of pollution. Green infrastructure, and what I mean by that is there are a number of examples, but for example, rain barrels, capturing water where it falls, not only to recharge our water table, but to reduce runoff that picks up excess nutrients in the form of fertilizers and pesticides, animal waste, and then goes into the stream, pollutes our water. So, different types of green infrastructures. Tree planting is a very basic one. And overall water conservation, reducing and reusing water, turning off the tap when you brush your teeth, taking shorter showers, filling up your sink with water when you're washing the dishes instead of just letting the faucet run. So there are a number of tangible solutions. So, we've kind of gone through some examples of problems and success stories and solutions on all three of these topics: earth, air, and water. So now what can you do? And one of the major things is get involved. Volunteer in your community, look for community-based organizations. If you don't know where to start, as simple as Google community-based organizations, community science, environmental justice in my neighborhood, climate activism in my neighborhood. And if you're overwhelmed, just pick one thing that you want to focus on and just focus on that. Secondly, adopt a sustainability mindset and practice behavior change. Really simple things if you want to start. Ditch bottled water, which is contributing to this dire crisis that we're facing related to plastic pollution. Try to reduce the amount of waste that you're producing. Turn off the lights when you leave the room. Turn down your thermostat when you leave your house. Really, really tiny but simple solutions. And lastly, if you cannot find anything in your community, organize in your community to combat climate change and fight for environmental justice. Don't be afraid to get involved with local policies. Talk to your local elected officials. We live in a democracy. Our lawmakers are not the people that are supposed to be shaping our policies. It's us. We're meant to voice our opinion, to let our voice be heard, and so let your voice be heard. Again, I just want to plug Imana's website, imana.org/climate-crisis. There are a number of resources on this website and ways that you can learn how to get involved and volunteer your time. And I will just end on a very sappy note that together we can really create a better world. If there's even something tiny that you can do starting from today, imagine if everyone took a tiny step to being more environmentally conscious and what impact that would have in combating our climate crisis. That's all I have. Thank you so much. It's been an honor to be with all of you. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much, Sister Lubna, for that incredible presentation and for bringing it all together for us. earth, water, air. Um, to do my little plug or my little attempt at poetry, through working together makes our hopes increase to live in a sustainable world of love and peace. And it's not cliche. It's something that we can do, brothers and sisters. Before bringing Imam Zaid on, I thought it would be appropriate to hear from one of Harlem's own, one of the natives from Harlem that I was introduced to quite a few years ago by my professor at Drew University's Theological School, mentor, Dr. Laurel Kearns. This young brother's name is Joshua Bennett. He is a poet and spoken word artist. At that time, he was in high school. Now he's a professor at Dartmouth University. He had recited his poetry in a celebration of poetry that was done at the White House in front of President Obama. He's one of those many poets and spoken word artists who utilizes his craft as a means of cultural resistance. So without further ado, and before we bring on Imam Zaid, I will try to share with you a poetry of a young Joshua Bennett about his native Harlem. Let's see if we can get that on the screen. And I don't seem to have it. Technical difficulties always happen, right? Well, maybe we will see that later. Let's see. Maybe we will see that later. So allow me to share my other screen. I am technologically challenged, which I'm told is a sign that we are environmentally sound. So let me try to share that screen for a moment. I need your help. Imam Zaid, welcome. Alhamdulillah, your ears. I had a more formal introduction to you, but we're honored and blessed to have Imam Zaid Shaker with us this evening as well, to bring it on home. Imam Zaid is well known to all of us and many of us. I will share his bio later, but he is currently the Emir of Imana, the Muslim Alliance in North America, which is a co-sponsor of this webinar, and that is a joint endeavor of these organizations. He's well known to the Muslim community here in the East, which is the traditional lands of the Lenape people here in the greater New York area, and we acknowledge that. He is a longtime climate activist, civil rights warrior, hood struggler, and revolutionary. Wherever he goes, the blessings of his work are seen in the masajid, the houses of God that he leaves behind, whether it's in New Brunswick and whether it's in New Haven, Connecticut, whether it's in Oakland, California, and many other places. Continues to inspire Muslims around the country and has taken it to the level of bringing traditional Islamic knowledge in a way in which we here in America can understand and benefit from it and help to provide guidance to others through the establishment of the first full-time Islamic college and university, Zaytuna College. He's one of the co-founders of that, along with Sheikh Hamza. So without further ado, Imam Zaid Shaker, welcome.
جزاك الله خير. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. First of all, we'd like to acknowledge and thank Brother Safid, our moderator and host. May Allah bless him, bless the work that Isna is doing and the wonderful team they've assembled. And we'd like to thank Sister Lubna for a very informative and insightful and well-informed presentation. And we'd like to acknowledge the work that Imana is doing and all of the wonderful people she's working with at Imana and beyond the auspices of that particular organization and many other organizations, individuals she's working with to, as she said, make the world a more verdant and livable place. Alhamdulillah, and alhamdulillah, a lot of what she mentioned, it, it gave some practical suggestions in dealing with some of the things I'll mention, inshallah. So environmental justice is a movement that is emerging to address the issue of environmental injustice. And environmental injustice occurs in several areas. The Environmental Protection Agency, in its scaled down, gutted form that occurred over the course of the last 4 years, even so, they have done some good work. One was in identifying those areas where environmental injustice is most prevalent. And injustice meaning practices, realities, phenomena that disproportionately affect African American, primarily African American and Latino populations. Others are affected, for example, in Oakland, West Oakland is primarily African Americans that are affected by the poor air quality generated by the port. So you have ships coming in constantly that are burning one of the most polluting and dirty forms of petrochemical fuel, and that is bunker fuel. And so it's dirty diesel. And then the diesel trucks that are coming to the port to pick up the things that the ships are bringing in. And so those neighborhoods are overwhelmingly African American, but in recent time, there are a lot of Asian and Pacific Islanders living in those communities, and a lot of Latinos are moving in. And so you have Asians, Pacific Islanders, and others who might be affected, but the overwhelming majority of the affected populations are African American and Latino American individuals. So those areas, one is lead, and the disproportionate impact lies in the fact that lead poisoning generally occurs in poor neighborhoods where the infrastructure is older and decaying. We saw that in brilliant display in Flint, Michigan, but also lead paint. So older houses that were still have exposed lead paint are more likely to be rented to people in the demographics that I mentioned. The second is drinking water, and affected by many different things, by lead, by other petrochemicals, by human waste when it's poorly treated. And again, populations in areas exposed to poor drinking water overwhelmingly, and farming communities, industrial farming communities where you have large numbers of primarily Latino farm workers, the pesticides in the water is another cause of poor drinking water quality, poor air quality. Sister Lubna talked about that, I think, adequately. But just again, low income communities that are situated near ports and near highways, major highways, and other areas where they're exposed to the sources and causes of poor air quality. Hazardous waste sites, and we'll talk about one in specific. We're going to mention 3 or 4 specific examples of these things. Pesticides, the Latino farm workers, they even have a disease, valley fever, in the Central Valley in California, where the pesticides and the dust, it's a very dry area. There's a rainy season, but that rainy season is generally becoming much shorter than it was in the past. So there's more dust, the pesticides in the dust, and that's blowing, and people are breathing that. It's getting in their eyes. It's causing all sorts of problems. And landfills. So again, African American Latino communities are more likely to be in neighborhoods that are in close proximities to landfills. And so these are major problems that we see around many of our cities. Specific examples of these. So for example, in East LA, Exide technologies has been illegally dumping toxic chemicals in one of the largest Latino communities in this country. Now, the harm from that we can see in the news recently. Recently, that same community was experiencing the highest number of COVID-related deaths in the country. And so a lot of the morbidities that aid a person likely having a bad outcome with COVID are a direct result of the reckless and even diabolical actions of Exide Technologies. And so that neighborhood that has literally been built in and around a toxic waste dump is the neighborhood that has the highest percentage and in a sense, even raw numbers of COVID related deaths in the country. And last month is just an explosion. That was, I think, 1,000 times higher than the national norm. So that's one area, and that's in East Los Angeles. Cancer Alley in southeastern Louisiana, along the Mississippi River from New Orleans to Baton Rouge, an area that's overwhelmingly African-American population, as it's almost a strip of petrochemical processing plants, plastics plants. And you can read about the mentality that makes that possible and facilitates that in I think an incredible book. We actually had a book club at Zaytuna College where the author was a guest, Arlie Huxchild, Strangers in Their Own Land. And she lived there off and on for 4 or 5 years and just documented the pollution, the mentality that made people want to eliminate the Environmental Protection Agency. That should sound familiar to those who have been following our politics for the last few years, even though they're the most polluted area in the country. And that pollution disproportionately affecting African Americans, not exclusively, and you see that in the book, illustrated in the book, 50 times more likely to have cancers than the national norm. Just think about that for a minute. 50 times more likely. And the kind of deregulation and the acceptance of just murderous practices, this is where a particular political party wants to bring the country. And I don't say that to just bash the party. That's why I didn't say the party's name. But they want to take Cancer Alley and make America Cancer Alley. Just deregulation and not anyway. We won't get into what deregulation involves, but that's another example. A third example, and I'll stop there, is the pig farms in eastern North Carolina, which are consciously and deliberately situated in an overwhelmingly African-American populated area. 9 million pigs that produce 10 billion gallons of waste annually. I think about that, 10 billion. And what is waste? Urine, feces, blood, and aborted fetuses. That's the waste. The stench alone is almost unbearable. 4,000 waste lagoons that float over in ecological catastrophes like Hurricane Matthew, and even lesser storms. Those lagoons flood, they flood local waterways, they flood fields and farms, living areas. In normal, so that's exceptional time, a hurricane like Matthew blows through. During normal times, when those lagoons fill up due to the constant flow of those 10 billion gallons of waste annually, the liquid is sprayed into the air. And some say it to irrigate, to fertilize farms. Most of it is breathed by human beings. It coats their houses with this pig waste. People can't, if they think it's a good day to put their clothes out on clotheslines, the clothes become caked with this liquid waste. And as a result of breathing it, as a result of smelling it, as a result of living in close proximity to it, and the methane gas that it produces on top of the biological and other matter, the waste matter, the chemicals from the antibiotics that the pigs are fed to just keep them alive in all of the stench and the waste. Asthma, anemia, kidney disease, cancers, high blood pressure, all of these are health maladies that the people there have to deal with. And so the environmental justice movement is trying to address those problems that almost exclusively result from conscious policies. And so addressing those policies is the work of the environmental justice movement. And Sister Lubna did a wonderful job in pointing out some of the organizations and initiatives that are arising to address that movement. I would just add one thing. In addition to organizing to address the issue at a systemic level, as individuals, we can make a huge difference. Just think how much more pigs would be in this country contributing to that waste if 10 million Muslims were eating pork. And so just by not eating pork, we're making a difference. But we have to cut down on how many times you go to a Muslim house and they feel they're honoring you, which they are in a sense, by serving you 2 or 3 different types of meat at a single meal. So you have the lamb, you have the beef, you have the chicken. But all of those animals, with rare exception, are being produced on these massive feedlots, similar to the situation in North Carolina. They're producing unsustainable and unmanageable amounts of waste that usually are dumped into the nearest local waterway. The pesticides used to grow the feed, to feed these animals, the chemical fertilizers, the waste itself, all of these things are unsustainable. And so we have to cut down on meat consumption generally. The Amazon is being torn down, burned down, slashed, burned, bulldozed to grow soybeans to feed our animals, to create cattle ranches. So we have, by just cutting down, eat meat once a week. We don't even buy meat in my house. Very rarely. Let me correct that. We rarely buy meat. I can say a few times a year we'll buy meat on certain occasions. We eat it when we go to these banquets and dinners, which we haven't been doing thanks to COVID. But Eid, we get meat, we freeze some of it, and that's it. You don't need to eat meat every day. And that's one small way we can make a difference. So the balance of my time, I'm going to try. I was smiling when I came on, because while I was listening to Sister Lubna, I was trying to get my screen share to work. I was testing it out. And like my dear brother Safid, I'm technologically challenged, so I was unable to do it. So let me try again. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali Sayyidina Muhammad. So let me go. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. So interesting. So I'm going to take a few minutes. If not, I'm going to just yield back to Brother Safid. So bear with me, folks. I had the video, okay, and meeting, full screen. There we go. Oh, that's that full screen.
And you share it with the sound, Imam Zaid.
I share it with the sound. So how do I share? What do I hit?
Share screen. You should see the video in one of the windows, and there's a box at the bottom that says share sound, and then it should work. Share screen is at the bottom of the Zoom screen.
Yeah, I have that, the green arrow. green box with an arrow in it, and share sound. I check that.
And then you should be able to click the box where you see the video in.
I don't see the video in any box.
Maybe it was in your email. If you click your email box.
Okay, is there an email box up here? I see Google Drive, Microsoft, Dropbox. Let me get it. Okay, that's the basic. Okay, desktop 1. So I should be able to share my desktop, right? Let's see. Oh, okay, here we go. Allows Zoom to share your screen. So okay, Zoom. Okay, so let's see what happened. Oh, there we go. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. So can you see me?
Absolutely, we see you. Yep.
So this is making my own soil, getting ready for a nice garden project in the spring to produce our produce, inshallah. So I'm in the basement here. الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. This is Imam Zaid Shakir. Obviously I'm in the basement. I'm talking over the roar of the furnace, but the furnace is a very important part of this operation, which is indoor composting, because composting, brothers and sisters, takes place best in a warm environment. So this one in the backyard or the garage and it's freezing cold, and nothing's going to decompose. So if you come over here, we got 2 of these big buckets. This is the first one. We're almost filled up with this one. You can see if you come over here, the rich compost. And the deeper I dig down in here, the more pure composting soil it is, because there's layers. And so you see that down in there. Bring the camera down in the hole there. And so this is all going in the garden. You do it right, there's no odor. This is more recent up here, this layer. So we're gonna just do a new layer here, and I'll give you the key ingredients to make it happen. Again, you can do this. We're in the house, obviously, in the basement. It's an old basement, but it does the job. So we're gonna add, what we do, most of ours is fruit peelings, as you'll see, onion skins. We freeze it. We freeze it so it doesn't, you see that frozen chunk there? So we have another one. It kind of built up because I didn't get to do this video right away. Normally, there'd be 1 bag. So we have 2 bags. So what we're going to do, so this provides your nitrogen for your compost. You see some eggshells in there. So you're going to break it up. The smaller the pieces, and that's one advantage of freezing, it makes it easy to break it up. The smaller the pieces, the better it decomposes. Some people even will put it in a blender and really chip it up, really do it. But that's not totally necessary. So we break up that big block you saw here. And now normally, I would let this thaw out before I layered it up. But this time, since we're making the video, we'll do it while it's frozen. Like I said, you see a lot of banana peels, a lot of orange, natural vitamin C. Sometimes you take the powdered ascorbic acid. It can interfere with other vitamins. Best to get your vitamin C naturally if you can. You see the light fell down here. MashaAllah. Do some quick surgery here. Inshallah. Oh. There we go. So anyway, so You break this up nice and good. Good workout, folks. So they're doing the heavy lifting. The microbes. This is going to do the work. So put a layer of soil here. So as I said, this provides the microbes. And the microbes, that's what does the work. The microbes, they break down and decompose everything. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes.
Yeah, we have solar, but the solar panels have been buried under snow for the last few weeks. This is the solar outflow box. So you sell the excess back to the grid. But I just wanted to point that out. So the furnace isn't always roaring like that, but the last few weeks, the solar panels have been dead. Nothing, because they're buried under a foot of snow or so. So they're doing the heavy lifting. So we'll work that in. Get your head now. Now these provide carbon. Carbon is not only a vital nutritional element for your plant, but it also kills the bad bacteria. And that's why you don't have any odor. Then there's your carbon, the nice thick layer of leaves. We're going to work those in. Now, because there's a lot of fruit peels, there's a lot of water. You see at the bottom, you get water running out. Now, I could do this. I could add water if you were using worms. You can actually put a spigot. You have to elevate this. You could put a spigot at the bottom. You could actually get juice that you could water your plants with. And that's nutrition in and of itself. So we're going to work these leaves in here into the mix. And so bring the camera over. You see that's mixed in nice. You saw the leaves piled up before. Now you see it's mixed in the soil. You can see some of the peels. So there it is. So I just let this sit. And in 3 weeks, this will look like what you saw at the beginning of this video. And so in the springtime, inshallah, planting time comes. We're going to have 2 of these big buckets to spread out in our garden boxes. Mix that with soil. Mix that with the soil created by decaying leaves back in the woods. And we're good to go. We're ready to plant, brothers and sisters. And this is rich nutrient. This is rich nutrient. No odor. Like I said, the carbon, any bad bacteria, the carbon is going to kill. The soil is going to provide the good, positive, healthy microbes that are going to eat away at everything. The carbon's going to kick in, and we're making soil, brothers and sisters, in the basement, not outside where you can cheat, just dig up, throw some dirt in there. No, it's all coming out of the bucket. May Allah bless you. We hope everyone gets involved with urban farming, backyard farming, balcony farming, rooftop farming. And let's make this world a cleaner, healthier place. Grow our own produce and not using petrochemicals to truck it all over the world, fly it all over the world. We're growing it in our backyards. We're growing it on our porches, on our balconies. This is Imam Zaid Shakir. Just got my workout in, got some soil in. May Allah bless you. Let's become part of this growing movement. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Okay. So we have another film to share if there's time, but I'll stop and give the mic back to Safin, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum, jazakallah khairan. And thank you so much, Imam Zaid, for wonderful, inspirational work. You know, I was just thinking of the verse in the Quran, Minha khalaqnakum, wa fiha nu'idukum, wa minha nukhraj ukhra. From this earth we created you, or from this soil we created you, to this soil we return you, and from this soil we will resurrect you again. I'd rather be resurrected from that soil that you are doing in your basement, you know, than the soil you spoke about earlier when we were speaking about the pollution associated with the pig farms and with the modern agricultural practices that destroy the earth, destroy the air, destroy the land, and also destroy the workers who have to work in that type of situation and environment. I'd like to see if we can bring Sister Lubna on, and maybe we can have a three-way. And inshallah, questions and answers. So we have a few minutes left before we do our closeout, and I'd like you either to share a reflection, a closing comment, or if you would like to pose a question to yourself or to one of the other folks that are, one of the other brothers or sisters that are on this panel. Because I was looking in the chat, I didn't see any immediate questions, although I'm sure there are a lot that are out there. But so feel free. Sister Lubna, we'd love to hear from you first. Reflection, conclusion piece, a question, self-answering question, however you would like to conclude.
Yeah, I'll keep it short. First of all, just some reflections based on Imam Zaid's comments. I'm very happy that he brought up the South. I think the South, Cancer Alley, is often a group of states that often gets left out of the conversation, even in environmental justice circles. So really thinking about those communities as well. I love the emphasis on reduced meat consumption. I think that's a really hard one for many people. But again, small actions, even if people start off, heavy meat eaters may do a meatless Monday, or, starting off very small. And I also love the video of making compost. It is, once you have all the ingredients, it is a very simple process. It's also very gratifying to have this rich soil that then you can use to grow your own vegetables. And it's a very rewarding experience. I will just say that kind of tying this back to Islam and our deen, Islam is really centered in altruism and the concepts of selflessness. And it's really our responsibility to take care of this earth, not really looking at this as a chore, but as a requirement, as a necessity to be conscious humans, thinking beyond the self, thinking about the impact that each and every one of our actions has on this earth. And if that feels like overwhelming and burdensome, again, start small, maybe just try to stop using bottled water, maybe scale back your meat intake. Maybe find your local bus route so you're not driving to work every day instead. I think that sometimes thinking about these concepts starts off to be a little bit burdensome. You may feel a lot of guilt, but as you start to implement solutions, I guarantee you that you'll feel better as a person in your community. And so, to kind of end it on the cheesiest note possible, be the change that you wish to see. If you don't do it, who will? And what kind of planet are we leaving for our next generation and the many generations that inshallah will come after us? Assalamu alaikum. Thank you.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Yeah, if I may.
Imam Zaid, yes, please.
No, the last point about the water bottles. None of us should be drinking here in North America, unless it's even finding alternatives
if we're in a place like Flint, besides these millions of plastic water bottles. It's unconscionable, unnecessary. Most of that plastic is not recycled. You put it in the recycle bin. It's either dumped in the ocean or shipped to places like India, melted down in very, probably more environmentally destructive ways than if we just threw it in out into the street or something. It was bundled up, packed up, shipped off to places like China, Malaysia, Singapore. They stopped taking it, each of those countries. And so most of it is just going to be dumped in the water. It's going to, they say by 2050, there'll be more plastic matter in our oceans than biological matter. And so Ramadan's coming, I think, Isna's Green Ramadan. We should make it an imperative that we will not allow plastic bottles in the masjid. Bring a reusable water container. And if you drink it all, go fill it up at the fountain or the sink or somewhere. We should not allow plastic water bottles in our homes nor in our institutions. And that's a simple thing to do. And the alternative is simple. Just buy a reusable water container. Fill it up at home for free. It's also absurd to be paying all of this money for water when it's an unregulated industry. So it's probably dirtier than your tap water. There's no regulation. They're bottled at the source from someone's tap somewhere. We don't know. So I think Fiji water is they're draining the aquifer, and so the local people don't have good water to drink because they're shipping it all over the world for profit. So you have the petrochemicals used, the fuel to ship it, the plastic bottles that are going to just be thrown in the ocean. And then the people in Fiji don't have proper water to drink. So these are simple things we can do. But if millions of us are doing these things, it makes a huge difference.
Absolutely. Full agreement. And actually the International Panel on Global Climate Change, the IPCC, which is the scientific standard by which all these areas are being judged, is came out and said it. Without individual action and changing of our personal consumption and consumption behaviors, the advocacy by itself will not be enough. The technological fixes by themselves will not be enough. It requires, there was a very interesting, you remember we were at the climate march together, Imam Zaid, there was a very interesting slogan. In order to change everything, we need everyone. And everyone can do their share. And alhamdulillah, as Sister Lubna mentioned, our religion of Islam empowers us through the prophetic example to find ways, for example, conservation of water. When we learn that the Prophet never made wudu with more than 2 cups of water, or an entire shower with more than a gallon of what we would translate probably to a gallon of water, or not more than a gallon of water. Just think about that. If everyone implements that as part of the practice, 1 billion people worldwide within the Muslim community, and if others adopted that practice, where we would be with regard to water conservation. For at the end of the day, water, herbage, vegetation, and energy are supposed to have accessibility to all. They're not supposed to be denied for anybody. And bottled water comes from privatization of nations around the world that are selling the rights to their water to industrial companies, to companies like Pepsi Cola and others, and the people of that land do not have water to drink themselves, let alone considering future generations. So I think each and every one of us can make a difference, and that I think would be a takeaway message that we can have from here. I know we have to wrap up because we promised folks to finish by about 9:20 Eastern Standard Time. So with your permission, I will go to our last couple of slides. And inshallah, we do invite your questions to continue afterwards. You can always email or text or use the chat function at the Isna YouTube channel, as well as reaching out to Imana, Islamic Medical Association of North America, and their website. You can reach Sister Lubna through there, or just general questions as well. And the same through the Muslim Alliance in North America, the website of the organization which Imam Zaid is the emir of, the largest national African American Muslim organization, and also now incorporates the terminology that Sister Lubna brought to our attention. BILPOC incorporates both indigenous as well as Latino communities as well, recognizing that the future of peoples of color in many ways is tied together and is connected to the earth. And so let us reconnect to the earth in a good way, inshallah. And with that, I'm going to try to share my screen and wrap us up and take us out, inshallah. I thank you once again for your wonderful participation in the audience. We thank you, Imam Zaid and Sister Lubna, for your very informative, educational, and inspirational talks. And we look forward to being able to share with you again as part of the Isna webinar series as we collaborate with our brother and sister organizations, because in order to change everything, we need everyone, inshallah. Thank you. Jazakallah.
Jazakumullah khairan.
Oh, let me try to do the slide share. And from current slide, is it sharing? I think so. Is it sharing?
Yes, it's sharing.
Okay, let me go to the end here. Okay. I'd like to mention the upcoming webinars. We are going to, and an upcoming collaboration as a follow-up to this webinar, inshallah. As a follow-up to this webinar, Isna, Imana, and Mana are announcing here formally a joint initiative that we are finalizing. It's in the final stages of development, and that is to provide and empower the members of our communities, in particular the members of our brothers and sisters who are struggling within the inner city communities, as we have spoken about today, with a COVID-19 environmental care package. This is sort of will be a humble gift from these three national organizations as a way of providing both educational information, practical products that will help in the protection and prevention against COVID, like sanitizing wipes and masks, educational information, a Muslim guide to COVID-19 will be part of that package, as well as information on planting and gardening and seeds to start your own garden in your own house. As Imam Zaid said, your own balcony, your own apartment, your own kitchen. Everything is possible. We need to plant green. We need to connect with the green that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed this earth with. And I would like to mention to all of you that ISNA will have an upcoming webinar on the Green Ramadan campaign, which Imam Zaid mentioned. This year, it seems we will have Ramadan once again in our homes, in which our homes become our masjids. So it'll have an important information as how you can sign up and do specific actions and take specific, involve yourself in specific types of campaigns where you can adopt the prophetic lifestyle, especially during the month of Ramadan, and reduce your carbon footprint. Walk upon the earth softly as Allah commands to those who are the servants of the merciful. Ibad Rahman alladhina yamshuna ala al-ardi hauna. There'll be a couple of programs that are coming up. I'm going to mention one of them. There's an interfaith dialogue on care for our common home, Ladato Si. I'm honored to be part of that team. There will also be a upcoming webinar after Ramadan that ISNA will be participating in and helping to organize a series of webinars regarding the Energy Star Action Workbook for Muslim communities and congregations. This will allow Muslim communities to receive, after going through a rigorous process and a measurable process, receive the Energy Star certification from the EPA for their buildings, for our schools, for our masajid. They are major contributors, commercial buildings, to global warming with greenhouse gas emissions and energy consumption. So this is a very step-by-step way that was done in collaboration between ISNA and the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. It's the first collaboration of such a sort between an Islamic organization in America and the EPA. We call it a private-public partnership in this regard, and look forward to, after Ramadan, several webinars on that. I'd also like to mention that, and we don't have a slide for that, but save the date, February 21st. The Muslim Alliance of North America is having a special program on Malcolm X, Al-Hajj Malika Shabazz. Information will be forthcoming, so please do save the date for that important program. One of the characteristics, or regarding the genesis of the environmental struggle, is that an environmental justice movement is that it was born out of the civil rights movement and the struggle for human rights in this country within the African American community. And Malcolm X, Al-Hajj Malika Shabazz, as Shaheed, was one of the great leaders of that. So look forward to that webinar coming up. And as I close us out, I'm going to try to do a last share with the poem, if I can get it. You can watch that or not as we close out from this. So I'm going to do that now. Stop share. And then I'm going to share again. This is Joshua Bennett. And where did he go? There he is. Here he is. Let's get him in. Stop share. Let me go to share again. And we'll close out with the church mouse. Share sound. This is a young Joshua Bennett. I wanted to share it before. We'll share it now. May Allah bless you. Keep your family safe. Blessings of the month of Rajab.
I grew up believing that water should be the color of corpses, that air should taste like a gumbo of gunpowder and weak old garbage cans, that children should have mouths like landfills and learn to speak hatred before they ever know what it means to love language across this country, on the wrong side of the poverty line, where the bodies are too dark for television cameras. Environmental racism is little more than yet another set of unfamiliar syllables rich people use to describe the way it's always been for us. See, the sun made us ultraviolet, but the hood made us ultraviolent, in a place where neighborhood residents become nuclear reactors who transform street corners into Chernobyl disasters based on each other's actions. We are dying to explode into one another. Hazardous material has transformed Harlem into Hiroshima. There are pregnant mothers with mushroom clouds inside their wombs glowing like a shard of uranium the second before the atom splits. And I'm scared to raise my children in a neighborhood where people look like them. Toxic wastelands where dirty water leads to infected minds, so we throw up gang signs just to purge our insides, release heat to breathe easy, and never know the difference between what we were owed and what we learned to live with. And you would figure that after Birmingham and Tulsa, we will be used to burning by now. So we sit, brown bodies black into a crisp, on the back blocks of blacktop jungles where crack is king and dreams crumble like glaciers melting half a world away, that these children will never see or read about during summer school, where unair-conditioned classrooms grow too hot for knowledge to pass from lips to ears. Truth melts in the air slow and thick like the weed smoke we inhale just to forget what it feels like to always live life in extremes. Those moments where global warming becomes more than a buzzword, more like a reminder that the flashy cell phones we throw away every day may soon resurrect themselves as the most ironic reminders that we just want the world to hear us. Black lungs, so accustomed to not breathing, whether from drowning in transatlantic trade waters or hanging in the space between environmental legislation and corporate interest. We become non-recyclable refuse, the blackened ashes of America's past. Victims of a neglectful nation that simply cannot see that the month-old meat on grocery store shelves is the only thing around here going green. So no, my house doesn't have solar panels on the roof. My parents don't own a hybrid automobile, and I never considered myself an environmentalist until the day I realized that it is all connected. That the neighborhoods chosen to host toxic waste facilities are almost always communities of color. That there are chemicals in the water that make our little girls look grown before they're old enough to deal with the consequences. That my little brother Can't run quite as fast as I could when I was his age, because the smog has his fingers pressed firmly around his windpipe. And so until the day that we can exhale away this pain, you will hear my voice cascading across the sky, unmistakable as the sound of a crashing pesticide plane, begging Mother Earth to have mercy on her children.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. May Allah keep you and your families well. We look forward to being with each other again. Allah Imana.